The soft currency of survival, how desperation became America's most profitable export. Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred space where strong black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French. And today we're diving deep into a conversation that might just change how you see your struggles, your choices, and your path forward. I recently had the privilege of sitting down with Moneque Laing, a powerhouse advocate who's dedicated her life to helping Black professionals and entrepreneurs break free from cycles of exploitation and desperation. Moneque's work is transforming how we understand the relationship between chaos, despair, and the desperate decisions that keep us trapped. She's not just talking about change, she's architecting it, one community at a time, building bridges out of the very systems designed to keep us stuck. And let me tell you, the insights from our conversation are the kind of truth that sets you free, even when it stings a little on the way out. So let's talk about something nobody wants to admit: desperation. Not the kind you see in movies, but the quiet kind, the kind that makes you say yes when everything in you is screaming no, the kind that has you taking that loan you know you can't afford, staying in that situation you know is toxic, or accepting terms that make your stomach turn. Because what choice do you have? That kind of desperation doesn't announce itself with dramatic music. It whispers, it convinces, it makes the unacceptable seem necessary. It dresses up like opportunity and knocks on your door with a smile. Here's what Moneque helped me understand and what I want you to really hear today. Desperation doesn't just happen, it's bred. Chaos and despair are the parents, and desperation is their child. When systems create chaos in our lives, when circumstances breed despair, desperation becomes the survival response. And here's the part that'll make you mad: there are people, institutions, and systems that know this. They count on it, they profit from it. They've turned your desperation into their business model. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2007. You're a black family in America. You've been shut out of traditional lending for generations through redlining and discrimination. Then suddenly, lenders are knocking on your door, sitting in your church pews, promising you the American dream: homeownership, generational wealth, a legacy for your children. They're offering you loans and you're qualified. Uh, you're working, you're responsible. But behind closed doors, these same lenders are training their officers to target black neighborhoods specifically. They're offering subprime mortgages with hidden fees, balloon payments, and adjustable rates designed to fail. They're giving you the predatory loan instead of the prime loan you actually qualified for. Why? Because your desperation for wealth building, for stability, for a piece of the dream you've been denied makes you vulnerable. The chaos of systemic exclusion bred the despair of being shut out, which created the desperation that made you an easy target. This wasn't accidental. This was strategic. This was calculated extraction disguised as opportunity. When the housing bubble burst, black families lost 53% of their median wealth. 53%. White families lost 16%. By 2011, black median household wealth had dropped to $5,677. White household wealth, $113,149. Read those numbers again and let them settle in your spirit. The chaos of economic collapse didn't hit everyone equally. It devastated the communities that were already made vulnerable by desperation. It wiped out not just homes, but futures, not just equity, but inheritance, not just stability, but the very foundation families had sacrificed everything to build. But here's where it gets interesting, because Moneque's work isn't just about naming the problem, it's about breaking the cycle. Organizations like the National Community Reinvestment Coalition fought back. They exposed the racial targeting. They filed lawsuits. They won multi-billion-dollar settlements from Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and other institutions. They created community based financial literacy programs that reached over 500,000 Black families. They built alternative lending cooperatives and credit unions. They organized grassroots movements that prevented tens of thousands of foreclosures. They transformed desperation into purpose. They turned chaos into community power. And that's the first thing Moneque wants you to remember from our conversation. Desperation creates vulnerability to exploitation. When you're in chaos, when you're in despair, you become susceptible to predatory schemes, poor decision making, and manipulation. Understanding this vulnerability is the first step to protecting yourself and your community. It's not about shame, it's about awareness. It's about seeing the game before you're played by it. Now, let's talk about Detroit 2014. The city just went through the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history, institutional chaos at the highest level. And how did city officials try to solve their financial crisis? By extracting resources from the most vulnerable residents. They started shutting off water to over 141,000 households, predominantly in Black neighborhoods. Water bills were $75 a month, twice the national average, for a population where over 40% lived below the poverty line. They shut off water for families owing as little as $150. Think about that for a second. No water for drinking, no water for cooking, no water for bathing, no water for sanitation, no water for basic human dignity. Families faced impossible choices: abandon your home, risk having your children taken by protective services, fall deeper into debt with predatory payment plans. The city's desperation for revenue created policies that bred desperation at the household level. Parents sold possessions, took predatory loans, went without food. Some filled containers at gas stations. Others connected illegally to hydrants, risking criminal charges. The chaos of municipal collapse bred desperation at the household level. And suddenly, the choice between paying a water bill and feeding your children became a daily calculation. But here's what the city didn't count on: community. The Detroit People's Water Board created community based water distribution systems. We, the people of Detroit, filed federal complaints citing human rights violations. Grassroots organizations paid water bills for thousands of families. They brought in UN investigators who condemned the shutoffs as violations of international human rights standards. They built coalitions between labor unions, faith communities, and activist organizations. They created alternative water affordability plans based on income. They documented every injustice, every family affected, every child who couldn't bathe before school. The community response demonstrated that collective action can challenge systems designed to exploit desperation. And that brings us to Moneque's second key insight: strategic stability breaks the desperation cycle. Building financial literacy, emotional resilience, and community support systems creates buffers against chaos. When Black professionals and entrepreneurs establish foundations of stability, they're better equipped to make empowered choices rather than desperate ones. This isn't about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This is about weaving safety nets strong enough to catch each other when the systems fail us. This is where the soft girl era philosophy intersects beautifully with Moneque's work. Because what is softness if not the opposite of desperation? Desperation is frantic, reactive, survival mode. Softness is intentional, grounded, choice driven. You can't be soft when you're desperate. You can't rest when you're in survival mode. You can't say no without guilt when you're terrified of the consequences. You can't set boundaries when you're barely holding on. You can't choose yourself when the world has convinced you that your value lies in how much you can carry, how much you can endure, how much you can sacrifice without breaking. The superwoman cape we've been talking about on this podcast, that cape is often held in place by desperation. We wear it because we're desperate to prove we're worthy, desperate to keep everything together, desperate to avoid the chaos we know is lurking if we let anything slip. But here's the truth, that cape is heavy, and it's keeping you from the softness you deserve. It's keeping you from the rest that restores. It's keeping you from the boundaries that protect. It's keeping you from the life that's waiting on the other side of survival. Now, I need to tell you about Tuskegee, because if we're going to talk about how chaos and despair breed desperation, we have to talk about one of the most horrific examples in American history. For 40 years, from 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service conducted the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. They recruited 600 impoverished black men in Alabama, sharecroppers with no access to health care under Jim Crow. They told these men they had bad blood and would receive treatment. That was a lie. Researchers wanted to study the natural progression of untreated syphilis, so they deliberately withheld treatment, even as men went blind, became paralyzed, suffered organ failure, and died. Even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1947, researchers blocked participants from receiving it. They pressured local doctors and draft boards to ensure the men remained untreated. For 40 years, 40 years of watching men suffer, 40 years of documenting pain, 40 years of choosing research over humanity. The chaos of systemic poverty and Jim Crow oppression created a population so desperate for basic medical care that they could be exploited for decades. When public health service doctors arrived offering free medical exams, meals, and burial insurance, desperate men jumped at the opportunity. Their desperation was weaponized against them. Their trust was turned into a tool of their own destruction. Their hope for care became the very mechanism of their harm. It took a whistleblower, Peter Buxton, going to the press in 1972 to finally end the study. It took attorney Fred Gray fighting for a $10 million settlement. It took congressional hearings to expose the systemic racism in medical research. The National Research Act of 1974 established protections for human subjects. The Belmont Report created ethical principles. President Clinton issued a formal apology in 1997, but the damage was done, and the legacy persists. Medical mistrust in Black communities today is not paranoia. It's justified caution born from historical trauma. It's the understanding that desperation has been exploited before and will be exploited again if we're not vigilant. It's the knowledge that our bodies have been treated as laboratories, our pain as data, our lives as expendable in the pursuit of knowledge that was never meant to serve us. And that brings us to Moneque's third and most powerful insight. Collective healing transforms desperation into purpose. Desperation doesn't have to be a dead end. When we acknowledge our struggles, share our stories, and build together, we can transform the energy of desperation into fuel for purposeful action and sustainable change. We can take the very thing that was meant to break us and use it to build something stronger, something lasting, something that protects the next generation from the cycles we've endured. So here's what I need you to do: build your stability shield. 3 actions in 3 weeks. Week 1, start a chaos fund with whatever you can, even $10. Set up an automatic transfer, no matter how small. This isn't about the amount, it's about disrupting the scarcity mindset that desperation feeds on. Name it your I'm not desperate fund. Make it real, make it sacred. Week 2, Identify one area where lack of information makes you vulnerable. Finances, contracts, health, legal rights. Spend 30 minutes learning, watch one video, read one article, ask someone knowledgeable. Desperation thrives on ignorance. Knowledge is your armor, information is your power, awareness is your protection. Week 3, reach out to one person in your network or find one new connection and share resources. Maybe it's information about a predatory lending practice, a recommendation for a trustworthy service, or just a conversation about financial stress. We break the desperation cycle by building networks where information and support flow freely. We disrupt the isolation that makes us vulnerable. And here's the bonus action. If you recognize that you're currently in a desperate situation, tell one trusted person. Desperation grows in silence and isolation. Speaking it breaks its power. Naming it diminishes its control. Sharing it creates the possibility of support, solution, and solidarity. Because here's what I need you to understand in your bones: chaos will come, life will bring despair, but desperation is optional when we prepare, educate, and build together. Don't wait until you're in crisis to build your safety net. By then, you're already desperate. By then, you're already vulnerable. By then, the systems designed to exploit you are already circling. This is your moment. This is your choice. This is your chance to step out of survival mode and into something softer, something stronger, something sustainable. You deserve to make decisions from a place of power, not panic. You deserve to choose from abundance, not scarcity. You deserve to build a life where softness isn't a luxury, it's your baseline. So I'm asking you today, what will you do differently? How will you protect yourself before chaos knocks? How will you build stability before despair arrives? How will you create community before isolation takes hold? The systems that profit from your desperation are counting on you to do nothing. They're betting on your exhaustion. They're banking on your silence. Prove them wrong. Build your shield. Share your knowledge. Speak your truth and step fully into your era, where softness isn't weakness, it's wisdom, where rest isn't laziness, it's resistance, and where choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. The revolution starts with you refusing to be desperate ever again.